All right. Well, I don't know if I'm really going to post this, but I'm awake. So, just some weird night. Like near a little after midnight, I think. I was up. It's a little after 2 now. I'm still up. But yeah, it was weird. Like I had some like edibles, of course. And I went to, I just had this candle on and I was watching the Shy, and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna start the next episode. And then next thing I know, I woke up and it was still paused, and I saw this candle going, and I'm like, let me just blow out this candle. But some reason I was like, the last thing I remembered thinking was like I was gonna get some snacks. And so I went, even though it was like midnight, and I got some snacks, and I was like, okay. Like I kind of wanted to like study something, because I was trying to just study something this week. Like one of my friends brought up something about Egypt, and or something that was like vaguely relevant to Egypt, like earlier this week, and then it's kind of been on my mind, especially because the Jewish daily readings are now in the book of Exodus. So it's like 3 weeks into the book of Exodus, and yeah, there's a lot of Egypt going on in that section of the Bible. So I thought it was cool, and it was funny because like there was a passage that was just for that specific day, because it goes by like what portion for what day. And then I was like, I'll just like see the first like few sentences. Like I wasn't gonna like dive into the whole thing. And it had like a theme near like midnight, and like so I was kind of listening to this one guy talk on it, and then I started just listening to this other guy doing like, I think it was Nazir, like he was talking about like the Talmud passage about Nazir, and like how people could say that they are one or not, like the process of becoming one, and like the way you word the process of becoming one. So I think what Nazir is about people who want to be a Nazarite, taking that rite of the Nazarite where they take no wine, and I don't know what else, but I think they don't have any wine, and I think they don't cut their hair, maybe, so they have like, it's like an oath that they take, and I guess there are people who still do that. It's like a really ancient tradition, but yeah, I know there are people who do that. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting. And then the earthquake happened during that part. Like I kind of felt an earthquake like rolling, like you could like hear it, but because we live on a highway, there's always these like trucks, and so like it was kind of interesting that I was awake for that. And because I was just up, because I just woke up, a little after midnight. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, like when I first woke up, I was reading this one of my good old faves. I'm a fan of Chofetz Chaim, and they have so there's a new cycle that started this week. And so it was interesting, the one I read today. But I wanted to go through the other ones too. So the one that I read for today was for the third day, and the topic is reasons why Lashon Hara is so terrible. And there's 3 reasons they give. And it says, when people speak / listen to Lashon Hara, the Satan gets the ability to prosecute, and the heavenly court gets the right to listen to sins. The second point is Lashon Hara damages the potency of prayers and Torah learning that comes from the mouth. And the third one, Lashon Hara is a habit that piles up many sins very quickly. And so, okay, I'm going to look at the next 2 days as well. The day before that, for day 2, it says Lashon Hara is I haven't read these yet. Lashon Hara is the primary sin we need to rectify to merit redemption, because 1, it caused the current exile. 2, the Lashon Hara of the Meraglim also caused the exile. 3, Lashon Hara prolonged the Egyptian exile. 4, the Torah cursed Lashon Hara sinners. And 5, a Baal Lashon Hara is equal to a kofar. And it says, see Sefer for elaboration. So there's another book attached to that. And let's see. For the other one, it says Chofetz Chaim daily 29 tevis. If your information is not, it just kind of starts. Sorry. It says, if your information is not firsthand, you can say it if, and there's a condition. It says there's some conditions. Number 1, the listeners know that and will make more serious inquiries. And 2, they won't break it off because of you. It says the Chofetz Chaim concludes his sefer by saying that the main idea is to think before you speak. There's a lot of interesting points in these, but it's just kind of confusing. So basically, all this Lashon Hara stuff is like social expectations, like of how people should, according to these writings, like discuss and study like communication with like community, pretty much, for the most part. And so so basically it's saying that if you're talking about somebody and the information you have is not firsthand, you're allowed to say that information if the listeners know that and will make more serious inquiries. And I don't really understand what tevis means. I think it's a time period, because 29 tevis, and then it says new cycle 1 Shvat. So I think tevis is a time period. Tevis is over. The new cycle started on January 22nd. So these are the first 3 things that new cycle says. So yeah, that first one isn't like super clear to me. The second one talks a lot about like Jewish history, about Lashon Hara, and how it's related to different exiles. I don't know what kafir means. And the one that was for today, basically it said reasons why it's not a good thing. Basically, people have different beliefs about Satan or the Satan here. Like in Hebrew, it's Hasatan, which is like the Satan or the adversary of man. So it's like that being gets the ability to prosecute. So basically, if people are like gossiping or talking trash about each other or listening to it, then somehow that gives Satan the ability to prosecute, and the heavenly court gets the right to listen to sins. So does that mean that if it's not being spoken in that way, then other people don't get the right? I don't understand. That the beings in heaven, potentially angels, wouldn't have the right to listen to sins. So I don't know. I don't understand how someone would find that information out. I mean, I'm not like challenging it. I'm just saying like that's an interesting concept. I mean, I've already heard a lot of information about heavenly courts, and I think in what I was taught once, I remember one or maybe multiple like youth pastors or so saying this traditional belief that if you get like basically if someone's praying and they pray out loud about some kind of sin that they committed, if they're praying out loud, then Satan understands that, versus if you're not verbally praying out loud, then Satan wouldn't know. So I don't know if this is along those same concepts, but that's the only thing I've ever heard of or learned that this sounds anywhere near similar to this. And I don't know exactly if either of those are necessarily biblical. If they are, I don't know. It might be in some obscure place, or some written in some poetic way. So for Lashon Hara to be damaging to the potency of prayers and Torah learning that comes from the mouth, like that's another kind of supernatural thing that's going on. And Lashon Hara, that is a habit that piles up many sins very quickly. Like, I know everyone has different beliefs about, Satan, about sin, about things like that. I'm not here to be like, condemn people, but I always find it interesting, like these types of writings to be interesting, because I think once we start getting into concepts that are talking about like sin and Satan and heavenly courts and all these kind of things, it's kind of in this other supernatural place where it's like this other type of like concepts that are definitely controversial. I think that there are like the major ones that people almost worldwide, believe in, at least to some extent. Like, most people believe that you're not supposed to kill. Like, most cultures aren't really like, oh, yes, go ahead, kill everybody that you want. Like, most cultures aren't like that. I mean, there's usually some kind of rules and restrictions about, how you treat people. Certain people usually are getting more respect, or a lot of respect, compared to others who are still supposed to be treated with respect. Like, there's still usually some kind of concept of, like, being respectful and loving. So it is kind of interesting, once it starts talking about sin, it's like, depending what angle you're coming from, like, sin can mean almost anything. I found it interesting once. We had these, I think a lot of people have seen them. They're like these Bible, I don't know what they're called. It's like like something to get people to think more about prayer or something like that. And it's basically, it was like $1 million bill, because those don't exist, and it was basically a fake but realistic looking $1 million bill, and you would give it to people for free, and on it usually it said some kind of weird thing, like I think it was like, we are all sinners, and then, have you ever done this, or have you ever done that? Like, have you ever lied? Have you ever cheated? Have you ever stolen? Like, common things that, like, people do. And then it was like something along the lines of, you can be forgiven by, accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and praying that you want to be a Christian, or something along those lines. I don't really know. But I think the purpose was to kind of get people to think about, the things that they've done, to try to convert them, or have them kind of renewing their faith if they were already converted at one point in time. And then basically it's just an interesting kind of concept to have that. To kind of sorry, it sounds like somebody's like walking around. I think it's bass from outside. But yeah, people kind of would use those to try to get people to, think about their religion or whatever. But I mean, I remember, like, somebody was like, I don't know how, like, the approach was like so, like, abrupt, and there was somebody standing there just like calling everybody sinners, like, you're a sinner, like, and one other guy gets mad. He's like, I'm not a sinner, like, and the guy's like, have you ever done this, have you ever done that, and like all these kind of questions. And he's like, you're a sinner. He's like, I'm not a sinner. Like, everyone kind of has like a different definition of it. And, it's always kind of weird when people want to call other people sinners. It's like, it's such a weird thing to see happen. It's like, whose business is it of theirs? But, I don't know. Like, I feel like there's always this like approach that people maybe know naturally what it is, but I kind of play with the idea of, what's the difference between sinning and kind of like in psychology with like ego defenses. Like, what's the difference between sinning and things that result from ego defenses? Like, for example, A lot of time when it comes to gossiping or even treating somebody badly or, something like that, usually it comes from some kind of an ego defense. It usually comes from, I guess it's like an unconscious process where the mind pretty much is trying to protect, like, parts of itself that aren't perceived in a good light necessarily, because some people say, like, with theories that are related to like humans being like communal creatures and needing like community and groups to survive, and ultimately you don't want to make a bad impression to the point where your group or your crew or your tribe or whatever is like not thinking well of you. You probably wouldn't get the best of resources. You probably wouldn't have access to relationships with the best types of people, or access to like, interacting with them. And that could be problematic depending on if times are easy or harder. And so just like historically speaking, I guess that's kind of the idea, is that, the ego kind of protects oneself from looking bad, basically, or tries to protect from looking bad either in the group or to one's own self, to protect yourself from thinking bad about yourself, basically. Because pretty much anything that is on the list of dealing with like sins, like if you take the 10 Commandments, for example, like I think the first 4 have to do with like worshiping God, like about the idols, the not taking God's name in vain, keeping the Sabbath. Let me see. I don't know if I got all those right. Let me see. Oh yeah, not worshiping idols. That's the second one. And then from there it goes. I kind of have to do it in order. So I guess it's like honoring your father and your mother, not killing others, what did I say? Not committing adultery, not stealing, not lying, and not coveting. And I guess those are the 10. But, I mean, people can debate about even all that stuff for ages. But that list isn't really that extensive. Like, just on the surface, it's like, if you're doing anything outside of that, then it would be considered a sin if you're doing any of those things that it says like not to do. And I don't really know how much of that actually applies to most people today. I would say most people don't do most of those things. Like some of the spiritual related things, like like Sabbath or keeping, like, not worshiping idols or whatever. It's like, I think that depends kind of like what religion you actually are. But otherwise, I feel like most groups of people around the world kind of agree with the same topics. Like just about like generally what you teach your kids. Like, I feel like most parents want their kids to be respectful towards them. Most societies don't tolerate stealing and murder, and there's usually not all cultures have like issues with, marital, I don't know what you would call it. Because adultery, I know, is kind of a term that's used like in the negative connotation, like one person's married and they're sleeping with another person. Basically, somebody sleeping with a married person. But some cultures, that's not necessarily frowned upon. And some of those cultures do seem like they're able to manage that. Like it's a part of society and it doesn't seem like it causes massive issues. Yeah, I think coveting would be one that's a little, like, maybe not too many cultures are really too concerned with coveting, but yeah, I think greed would maybe be attached to that a little bit too. But it's just kind of interesting because I know, like, the reason why I'm mentioning all that stuff is because when things start talking about like sins and stuff like that, I know that a lot of times when people aren't like into religion, that is probably a really big turnoff point. Because nobody wants to be like getting blamed for stuff or being called like a sinner and all this kind of stuff. Like, nobody's really into that kind of way of like, nobody really likes that kind of an approach. And so I would say that I'd say on my end it's not too common that people are like talking too much crap about too many people. Like, I did actually have an experience pretty recently where some of that was going on. And I mean, it was also like people were drinking. So I kind of am like, taking things with a grain of salt. But there were a couple times where, people were saying stuff about somebody's mom or saying stuff about some other person that had like some racial comment and stuff like that. So I don't really know I've never had a problem with those people specifically, but I also didn't get up and walk away. Like, one of the people was like way more confrontational and they confronted the other person anyways. And so that was one thing, but I guess the other person was, talking from like a past experience that I wasn't a part of, and I had like no awareness of any of this kind of thing. It was basically like there was somebody that wasn't introducing themselves to certain people at the party, and some people got offended by that. So I didn't think it was a big deal. Like, I wasn't really in the mood to meet more than half the people there. So I could see if somebody doesn't want to introduce themselves to everybody. I mean, to me, it's like, it didn't seem like that big of a deal. And so, yeah, I would say that's always interesting. I had like another weird situation where one of my friends said that I had told them that another couple of my friends were married, and they kind of like dropped my name, and they were just like, oh, well, this is what that person said. And we're all just like sitting at a table. I'm like, why would I say that they were married? Like, they're not married, you know? Like, I said that they got a house together, and that they're in my eyes, they're practically married, because this person kept asking me, I think, about when they were moving. They were kind of asking me about other people moving. It was either when they were asking about moving or about some kind of an engagement related thing. I can't remember. But I remember them saying that, and I was just like, wait, I never said that. Like, I see those people all the time. Why would I just randomly say that they're married when I know that they're not married? And then they're like, oh, maybe, you know, like, oh, yeah, you said this other thing instead. And then, like, you know, one of my other friends was like, you know, thanks for, like, spreading all my business. And I'm just thinking, like, oh, my gosh, like, I wasn't, you know, like, but it's like, that's why I'm like, these guys, like, but I know that it was like a whole teasing thing. Like, everybody was just kind of like, you know, like, it wasn't like a serious topic or whatever, but I kind of wasn't into that. I was kind of not into somebody being like, oh, so-and-so said this. It's like, dude, don't bring me into this. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But yeah, like, it was really a little awkward. It created like a little bit of an awkward situation, in my opinion. But then it's kind of like one of those things when it's like, I don't like being in those weird positions where people think I'm like talking crap about them, because usually I'm not. And those people, I don't talk crap about them, and I don't want them to think that I do. So it was just kind of a weird situation. I was like, why would somebody say something so off the wall? And I was sitting right there. Like, we were all sitting like right across from each other at a table. So it's like, it's kind of more of like a laughing point where we were just like, what is going on? Like, I never said that. But it's just kind of weird, even when somebody brings up something like that that's like subtle, and it's not even like a bad thing. If I say like, oh, that somebody has a house together and they're practically married, like, that's not like a negative thing to say about somebody. But it's still really awkward if somebody brings it up and is like, oh, this person said this about you. Or another thing that I find awkward, which is kind of neither here nor there, but if you ever meet somebody and then, you know, like, say if you introduce like a date to like a group of your friends, or like you introduce, you know, a date to like one of your cousins or something, and then the cousin or your friends are like, oh, like, we've heard so much about you. Like, that is always like the weirdest thing. I always feel like that's the weirdest thing that people can say when they first meet someone, is like, I've heard so much about you. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, it just is weird sometimes, because then it's like, well, obviously then that just shows that like I've been saying something. But it's like, sometimes it's interesting if it's like a date or something like that, and then somebody says something like that. But I know it's meant to be like a good nice thing, but I do find it a little awkward sometimes. I'm like, dude, this is weird. But I don't really know. Like, it's kind of like a common saying, but I think it does kind of put somebody on the spot. And it can be a little bit awkward because then people are like, oh, what have they been saying about me? And it's just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, that kind of stuff. But I would say, yeah, usually people start saying things when they have like their own kind of maybe insecurities going on. And one thing that I find kind of difficult is like when there's people who always want to know information about other people. Like, as a person who usually is hanging out with like different groups of people, who a lot of them know each other, it makes it a little hard. Sometimes there can be a little bit of pressure from people to be like, oh, like, what's this person up to or whatever. And it's like there was one person that somebody was asking, and I was just like, I said like one sentence, like, oh, they're okay, they're working at this place for like however many hours a week or whatever, and then I just said, I can't tell you anything more. And I basically just left it at that. I was like, I can't tell you anything more. And so I didn't really I don't know, like, I didn't really like want to get into things. But yeah, I could tell it's those kind of situations where people always want more information, or like yeah, even when people are asking like, oh, like who's gonna make it to the event, like who responded, and then like I think there was a certain point where I was saying like there were a couple people that I hit up that just like didn't respond, so I kind of just took it as a no. But then also, like, the group I'm with, they tend to be really dramatic about things, and like, oh, so that means like this or that, and like they kind of make it a bigger deal than it is, and it's like, that is not what I said. But I don't know, that kind of stuff kind of worries me. Even though I know we're all joking, it's just like, it does get to a point where I'm like, with all the sarcasm and all the kind of like, just like people taking things to another level, and then somebody else at another side of the room overhears somebody saying something else, and then takes that conversation out to a different group of people, and next thing you know, there's some weird rumor. But yeah, like I do think one thing that's hard about catching up with people is that kind of fine line between like what you know about who, and I feel like I'm not that comfortable with people asking me questions about other people. Like, I feel like if they have their number, they should call them and shouldn't ask me. And I feel like it's always weird to try to catch up with friends when they want to catch up about other people who aren't really there, and that always leaves me kind of in this weird, uncomfortable situation. But yeah, like, I'm kind of trying to figure out like what the heck, like. But yeah, it's just kind of funny though, like all these topics. Like, I like these types of topics. I like the Chofetz Chaim stuff, not the most, but I feel like it's one of the more applicable types of things to read, because it's not like so out there. I mean, I like this kind of stuff, like talking about like how people talk to each other and stuff. Like, to me, that's kind of fun. But I do want to get into a little bit on the history of Egypt, But, yeah. So I guess it's late, and that's it for now. I don't even know if I'm going to post this, but I guess we shall see.